Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 198, September the 20th, 2017. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do believe it's Wednesday. Well, today Trump gave his speech at the UN. And I don't know how many of you had a chance to listen to it or watch it or what have you, but we had it on the radio at work and we were listening to it, so I got to check out most of it. And it was an absolutely epic speech. I can only wait till this weekend when I have some time to actually watch some video, because I actually want to see the looks on the faces of those EU socialists and technocrats while Donald Trump was laying out the nationalist populist line. And they had to be literally in torture mode. And it's funny because I was listening, and before he started speaking, the pundits were talking about, what he might say and this type of thing. And they had gone back and pulled a comment, something that he would say a lot during the campaign rallies when he was running for president, where he said, the UN is not a friend of democracy, not a friend of freedom or of the United States. It's just a club for people to get together and talk and have a good time. And he said that the UN was a perfect example of weakness and incompetence. So this really was in his speech. He toned down the rhetoric a little bit, but the actual nuts and bolts, the meat and potatoes, the essence of the speech, that was all there. And I just jotted down just a few notes as the speech was going along as I was trying to do my work. But there was a couple times, you could even hear it, where he did lines, where he said things where they were kind of like applause lines, because there was a pause there, but there was dead silence. And there was a couple times you could actually hear gasps. So he was slamming socialism. Keep in mind, these EU technocrats are socialist. There's even quite a few communists represented at the EU. So these people are hardcore leftist collectivists, various forms of collectivist. And of course Trump just destroyed collectivism and basically saying it's failed and all that type of thing. And they just had to be twisting in their seats at this point. I'm surprised a bunch of them didn't get up and walk out. But he also referred to the demonic Teletubby over in North Korea as Rocket Man. He said Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself. He actually got some chuckles there. He talked about another word that the EU and the technocrats absolutely hate, and a concept that they despise, is sovereignty. They've been in the process for the past 40 years at the UN of destroying national sovereignty. That's what the EU is all about. Destroying national sovereignty, nationalism. It's all about globalism. It's all about erasing the borders in Europe. And the essence of Trump's speech was just the exact antithesis of that. And he was promoting nationalism and talking about sovereignty. He was putting the kibosh on globalism. All the things that these people live and die for. I mean, these people worship at the altar of globalism. And here's Trump pushing the nationalist populist agenda and telling them that that they should be pursuing more of a nationalist policy, a policy that puts their countries first. And he also said, hey, I'm the American president. I put America first. These are, I don't know, maybe it's hard for some of you who have never really been around a whole lot of really far left type true believers, collectivists, but these are the types of things that just really trigger them big time. I mean, they just had to be twisting in knots. He also used the term radical Islamic terrorism, which goes to the very heart of the EU immigration policy and the biggest debate that's happening in Europe right now, the biggest point of contention between the EU and many member countries. And, I mean, he just gutted them like a fish with just that one comment. It was just absolutely marvelous to listen to Trump preaching nationalism and patriotism and anti-globalism and all this stuff, knowing good and well who his audience was. And like I say, I have got to look at the video this weekend, and so I can see the video of the looks on the faces of a lot of these EU technocrats. You know, it was always funny watching, I love to watch Nigel Farage videos when he was speaking there as an MP for the UK, and just looking at the faces, at the things that Farage would say. And what Trump did today was just, you know, it was absolutely epic. And it really tells you that, that given 8 years, and I believe he will get 8 years, Trump is going to change the world. Because I have to tell you that, you know, a lot of European citizens, I mean, are hearing that speech today, and it's being translated in, you know, many different languages. You know, the people in France, the people in Germany, the people in Austria, especially in the Czech Republic, the Baltic regions, people in Sweden, people all over Europe heard that speech today. And, you know, he had to have an awful lot of them cheering, and he could revitalize this really hardcore push for nationalism and populism in Europe. Trump is going to change the world. He's going to change the world. It's absolutely, we're living in an extraordinary time. You know, it's hard sometimes in history when you're at a particular time in history and you're living through it, you don't really realize how important these particular moments in time are, because you have nothing to compare them to or reflect on these things in their present state. You know, that's why when we go back and reflect on history, we can find a lot of things, a lot of meaning, a lot of things like that from going back and reflecting on the history. In 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years from now, people will be going back and reflecting on this particular time in history in the election of President Trump. And, you know, he wasn't just a private citizen that was elected in a small country in Europe or in the Caribbean or something like that. This is the United States of America, the world's only real superpower, the most powerful country in the world. And that's what he represents. He's the most powerful man in the world. And he's got the loudest microphone and the biggest pulpit to preach from. And I'll tell you what, he gave a sermon today. Absolutely epic. One of the best speeches I've ever heard, certainly ever heard at the UN. Farage has given some great speeches there, but this was absolutely epic because of the scale of the speech and the amount of reach the speech is going to have and the amount of effect it is going to have. You will see the reverberations of this speech throughout Europe in the months and years to come. Now, getting on to some TowerGate news. Fern, you implored me to watch that video, Son of Nuo. The guy's YouTube handle is Son of Nuo. And I went and watched the video. Yes, 53 minutes, kind of long, but that's all right. You're right. It was a very good video, and I would recommend anyone who wants to check out this video that Fern put the link up for, just go to day 197 and look at Fern's comment. She posted a link there. Go ahead and click on that link. And the video is very good. And what this YouTuber who goes by the handle Son of Nuo, and basically, I believe the name of the video was Susan Rice Confirms Trump Tower Wiretapped. And it's a very good video. I've seen a couple of this guy's videos before. I'm not a subscriber, but I have seen his videos before. And, you know, he's a pretty good YouTuber. And but he did a really good job of really laying out the case and connecting the dots. And he really relied on the parts of Susan Rice's testimony that is now in the public domain, which is not all of it, but just what we have in the public domain. He looked back at that April 3rd CNN piece, which we've talked about a lot here on TowerGate, and he also commented on the CNN story, the news story that's just come out, which was not covered on CNN, I don't think, on their TV, on their cable program. This was on CNN's internet news website, which is kind of like a CNN's version of like a print, it's like their newspaper edition online. And so it's different people and that type of thing, but still pretty close to what CNN does. But basically, he was tying all the, connecting all the dots and tying everything together, showing that what we're learning is that clearly the Trump Tower was under surveillance, which is exactly the point that Trump was making when he said he was wiretapped. And he goes into more detail, so I highly recommend that you watch that video if you would like. I found it was very, very good and informative. But the main push of the video, like I said, was he's making the point that, in fact, Trump was vindicated and that the Trump Tower had to be wiretapped. And he lays out the evidence for that, and it goes back to really something that I was touching on back when Devin Nunes, I did a TowerGate video the day that Devin Nunes came out and did his press conference, and in that video, it's been a long time, but I do believe in that video that I actually raised the question that he essentially was answering in his video, because now we have the transcript of what Susan Rice said, at least some of it in the public domain. And I remember speculating on that video at the time that because of what Nunes was describing, I said, this doesn't sound like a wiretap. When you're thinking about a wiretap, the term that we use, wiretap, meaning your phone's been tapped, you're getting the conversation of one or two people on a communication on a phone line. But if you look at the information that Susan Rice is talking about that they discovered, they're talking about a meeting between several people, 5, 6 people, including Kirshner in the room, Bannon in the room, 2 or 3 other people in the room besides them. So 5, 6 people in the room, and the conversations are being picked up. Well, this isn't something that you can do with a wiretap. This is something that can only be done by bugging the room. Surveillance on the whole room, because you're picking up all the conversations between all these people. This was not a meeting that happened over the telephone. This prince of the UAE was in a Trump's meeting place there at Trump Tower, where he was conducting a lot of his business at that time, where Manafort had an office. And this is what they're talking about in this conversation that they picked up on. Well, you couldn't pick up on that just by tapping, monitoring any one of those people's individual phone lines. You might get a two-way conversation there, but you certainly would not get the overall conversation of multiple people in a room. That could only be achieved by putting an electronic listening device into the room. There's a lot of problems, as is mentioned in this video. It raises more questions than it does answers, but certainly it leaves little doubt in anyone's mind at this point if you look at all the evidence that they had Trump Towers bugged. And I'm sure they were using all kinds of surveillance. I'm sure that there was wiretaps, electronic eavesdropping on the digital communications, probably email, probably phone, probably whatever type of communications they were using. But it appears now that the only way that you could pick up a conversation of multiple people in a room in Trump Tower was if you actually had a electronic listening device. This is, you're getting into some really steep water here when you start talking about this kind of thing. And still the question that needs to be asked and answered here is, what was the probable cause that was used to get the warrant to be able to conduct this surveillance? We still really do not know that. That is a question that should definitely be asked. There should be an immediate, Sessions should have already done it, appoint a special prosecutor to go look into this, because I think that there's going to be more coming out. Now, I watched this video, and yesterday there wasn't very much out there about this particular story by CNN. A lot of people hadn't quite connected the dots the way this guy did on the YouTube video, which is why you should watch it. But today, totally different. Today, Truth Feed, True Pundit, Gateway Pundit, Washington Examiner, quite a few of the sources I use for my TowerGate videos all had stories about this CNN article and drawing a lot of the same conclusions that this YouTuber draws. raising a lot of questions about, wait a minute, they're talking about this information that they learned, and they have these entire conversations of who said what to who. And these are multi-party conversations. You don't get that from a telephone. So there's a lot of questions to be asked here, and particularly the very first question that should be asked is, when they went to the FISA court to get the warrant, what was the excuse, what was the reason, probable cause? Because to get a FISA warrant, remember, you have to prove that someone is in some sort of collusion with a foreign government. And so this raises a lot of questions, and we need a lot more investigation into this. And again, Sessions should appoint a special prosecutor, special counselor immediately to really look into this. But it is looking more and more like what we've always suspected here at TowerGate, which is that you had a covert political operation which used the full resources of law enforcement and the intelligence community to spy on Trump and his team officials, simply to get information to be used for a political dirty tricks campaign. And then it was taken one step farther, trying to destroy his presidency or his candidacy, and then once he was president, taken another step farther to destroy his presidency. And of course, once he was president, of course, then you have the cover-up operations, which is what is happening now. What is happening now is the massive cover-up operations to stop any of the truth from coming to light. And that's what we're all pressing for here and waiting for. Patiently and diligently waiting for the truth. Waiting for people to be held accountable for their crimes. Because as I've said, going all the way back to my very first TowerGate videos, this is bigger than Watergate. It's bigger than Watergate. Okay, running out of time, so let's move forward very quickly, cover some more of the top news stories. Again, just as I just talked about, True Pundit stating that Trump vindicated. U.S. investigators wiretapped Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort, according to CNN. He's vindicated. Also, Paul Manafort's attorney has come out today and stated just what I just was talking about. Well, wait a minute. Based on this CNN story, based on what we're learning, it appears that the FBI broke the law, because apparently these FISA warrants and things like that are not supposed to be made public, regardless of what the outcome of them is. So there may be a lawsuit, and this is another thing that Robert Mueller runs a very high risk of. He runs a very high risk in going after Manafort or other people, and that runs very high risk that they may expose themselves to criminal liability for the things that we learn and are revealed as a result of his investigation. His investigation could very likely boomerang on him by turning up things that could come back and bite them in the ass. And this is what Manafort's attorney is talking about. And keep in mind, Paul Manafort is a very, very wealthy man. He can afford good lawyers. And he's a fighter. He's like Trump. He's a fighter. This thing has got a long way to go. Keep watching. Meghan McCain is in talks to join The View. She will fit right in there. Remember about a week ago when she said that America needed her father more than ever? She'll fit right in at The View. She's dumber than dirt. Next, we have Dana Rohrabacher telling the WorldNet Daily that Trump should meet with Assange, because Assange has the proof that Russia did not hack the DNC, or did not provide the emails, the DNC emails or the Podesta emails to WikiLeaks. So apparently, obviously, he talked with John Kelly. John Kelly is cock-blocking him. But I believe that if Trump and Rohrabacher want to have a conversation, it will probably happen. We just have to keep watching and seeing how that goes. Nutty Democratic senator tells CNN that Russia was to blame for that Dreamers protesting Nancy Pelosi. Yesterday we talked about the fact that Nancy Pelosi literally got booed off stage, had to be taken out of the auditorium for fear that her life was in danger, that her safety was at risk, because a bunch of dreamers came there to heckle her, and they ended up calling her, chanting liar, liar, liar. She made a comment to them. This really ticked them off even worse. They began to move toward the stage, chant even louder. They had to get Nancy out of there. And so now you've got this blowing up all over the liberal media. So they bring out this female Democratic senator. I think she's a state senator, not a national senator, a state senator. And she was telling this lady on MSNBC, the co-host there, telling the host of MSNBC, that she thinks that the Russians were behind it. That's just amazing. Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, is also considering a lawsuit against BuzzFeed. Remember, not only was Mr. Gubarev slandered, Michael Cohen was slandered. Remember the fake story that he met with some Ukrainian, Russian go-between? Turned out to be false. He'd never even been there. It was another Michael Cohen. So Mr. Cohen, and he's signaled over the past quite a few months that he's considering a lawsuit against BuzzFeed. That's the last thing BuzzFeed needs right now, because somebody is going to pay up to Mr. Gubarev, and they might be paying Mr. Cohen as well. He was slandered. No question about it. Lindsey Candy Pants Graham, now has joined the Democrats in calling for a carbon tax. He says the greenhouse effect is real. No, it isn't. Once again, I don't know how many times I have to go through this. Candy Pants. An increase in CO2 will produce more vegetation, larger vegetation, and therefore this more vegetation, when it begins to take on more CO2, you get more vegetation. It gives off more oxygen, and so you get this situation where you're going to need more CO2 because of the more growth of things like plants and trees and shrubs and things like that. So yes, the CO2 causes more of this type of activity, but then that new activity has to breathe, and it breathes CO2. It offsets. It's part of nature. It's been happening for 4.3 billion years. Candy Pants Graham is an idiot. Carbon taxes. That's a New World Order agenda plan right there. Obama still fetching top dollar, giving Wall Street speeches. He just inked a deal for $400 grand to give another Wall Street speech to Wall Street fat cats. There you go. The RNC is obliterating the DNC in money raising. In the month of August, the RNC reports $7.3 million compared to the DNC's $3.8. But keep in mind, the RNC has no debt. The DNC currently has about $32 million in debt. And we know about Bernie's problems. We have the Rotten Reverend, who forced Tim Kaine to buy her book. Tim Kaine was being interviewed on MSNBC, and they were asking him about, having read Hillary's book and all that type of stuff. And he basically said, well, she didn't send me a copy. I actually just got a copy. Haven't had a chance to read it. It should be home by now. I just ordered it, but she didn't give me a copy. I had to actually go out, buy a copy. So even her vice president to be, she didn't even send him a copy. What a tight witch she is. She probably made Chelsea pay for a copy, and Bill too. Let's see. Judicial Watch has come into some more Rotten Reverend emails that show where the Rotten Reverend, just after taking over as Secretary of State, that the Clinton Foundation invited Putin to the Clinton Global Initiative's 2009 annual gala. Yes, it's no secret that the Rotten Reverend and her husband were courting Putin and his friends and his billionaire oligarch friends to contribute to the Clinton Foundation. And when Putin and some of his buddies blew her off because they're not interested in promoting the globalist agenda, that's when she decided she didn't like Putin anymore. She was hoping he would pay up for some favors that she could grant him from the State Department. Putin's not playing ball, and he doesn't trust Hillary as far as he can throw her. Democrats blame Sputnik Radio for Hillary's loss and demand an immediate investigation. Well, for those of you who don't know, Sputnik, which I occasionally read, they have both Russian and English translation, as well as French and several other languages. It's basically like the third largest newspaper publication in Russia, Sputnik. Well, they just launched Sputnik, their new radio program, in June of 2017. The Democrats want to blame Sputnik Radio for Hillary's loss, demand an investigation, despite the fact that Sputnik Radio literally just got on the air 3 months ago, long after the election was over. Jim Acosta has now come out to join Maggie Haberman in the New York Times to disclose facts about the Secret Service and security protection for people around Trump. 2 days ago, it was Maggie Haberman telling the world that Don Jr. no longer had Secret Service protection. Now we have Jim Acosta telling the world that Kellyanne Conway no longer has Secret Service protection. You see what's going on here, folks. These are some very nasty people. This is why I hate them. Unbelievable. So anyway, that's where we are today. It's day 198, TowerGate. Again, I urge all of you to take a look at that link provided by Fern in the comments section from day 197 regarding the Trump Tower wiretapping. It's a very good video. Also, if you get a chance to watch Trump's UN speech, I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow night. Take care.